Hey Math Aces! Welcome to Mr. Ace Math. In this lesson, we're going to talk about solving one-step equations, but only involving multiplication and division. In the description below, you're going to find the video breakdown with hyperlinks to each part of this lesson. Feel free to use that to go to whichever part of the video that you need most. So first, we'll start with an equation model. Next, we'll go over one example, followed by a second example. Then we'll go into the pause and practice. These are questions for you to try based on what you've learned from this lesson. After that, the answers will be revealed. And finally, a reflection to go over everything we learned from this lesson. But in order to do well in this lesson, you need to make sure that you're comfortable with your basic operations. So make sure you know those, and let's get started. So here we have the equation 3x equals 12. The most important thing to understand with equations is that it's like a scale, where you have two sides of the scale, the left side and the right side. In order for this scale to be balanced, you need to have the same exact amount on the left and the same exact amount on the right. If you have too much on the left, the scale will tip to the left. And if you have too much on the right, the scale will tip to the right. And we don't want either of those things. We want to make sure that it's nice and level. Because when it's level, it means you have the exact same value on the left side and the right side. Let's go a little further into this model with an actual scale. And here we have 3x. So whenever we have a variable, it means that we have some value that we don't know yet. So let's use a box to represent that. So here's our box x to represent the variable x. But remember, it says that we have 3x. So how many x's are there? There's 3 of them, which means I'm going to have to put 3 boxes. Here's our first x, here's our second x, and here's our third x. So now we've got 3 x's on our scale, which matches the 3x on the left side of our equation. And now let's go to the right side. Here we have 12. And let's say that we're using marbles. So on the right side, we're going to put 12 marbles. Now remember that it's the same exact variable, which means that inside each of these boxes is going to hold the same exact amount. So how can we take these 12 marbles and break them up evenly so that each box holds the same exact amount? Well, we can divide them by the number of boxes that we have. And just looking at the diagram, I can fit 4 marbles in one box, 4 marbles in another box, and 4 marbles in a third box. And it's the same exact amount every single time, which means that x equals 4. And that definitely makes our equation work because the right side of the equation is 12. And what's 3 times 4? That's 12. And that makes our equation correct because the left side equals 12 and the right side equals 12. It's completely balanced, but only in this case when x equals 4. So here's our first equation that we're going to solve mathematically. We've got 5x equals 40. Before solving the equation, the first thing we should do is drop lines around the equal sign. So the first line going down will be right next to the equal sign on the left side, and the next one will be right next to the equal sign on the right side. This breaks up our equation into 2 sides. This side, which teachers commonly just call the left side of the equation, and this side here, which most teachers call just the right side of the equation. The next thing we should do is use inverse operations to isolate the variable. In case you don't know, isolating the variable just refers to the process used to get the variable on one side of the equation by itself. It doesn't matter if it's on the left, and it doesn't matter if the variable is on the right. All that matters is that the variable is by itself. And that's just what the word isolate means, to be alone. And inverse operations are just operations that are the opposite. So for example, if the operation we're using in the equation is multiplication, we'll use the inverse of that, which is division. And if we see the operation division in the equation, then we're going to cancel that out and solve by using the inverse of that, which is multiplication. Let's get back to our equation. So we've got 5x, which means 5 times x equals 40. Remember that the goal is to isolate the variable, and the only way to do that is by using inverse operations. Since this is 5 times x, the inverse of that is dividing by 5. So I'm going to divide the left side and the right side both by 5. And it's important to remember that you do it to both sides. That's called balancing the equation. Because when you balance the equation, you use inverse operations on both sides. You're doing the same exact thing to the left and right, and that doing the same thing is what maintains equality on both sides. So now on the left side, we'll divide 5 by 5. That just cancels out. This means x is by itself. So now we can bring it down. We'll bring down our equal sign, and then we'll just do 40 divided by 5, which equals 8. So our answer is x equals 8. And the technical term for that is solution. The solution is just when you have a numeric value for the variable in the equation, where one side is just the variable and the other side is just a value. Here's our next example. And it's a little trickier because we're starting with the variable on the right side. But keep in mind that that doesn't matter. We could have it with the variable on the left. We could have it with the variable on the right. But because they're equal, the side doesn't really matter. We'll follow the same process. So the first thing we should do is drop lines around the equal sign again. So we'll put a line down the left side of the equal sign and down the right side of the equal sign. This separates the equation into its left side and its right side. The next thing we should do is use inverse operations to isolate the variable. Again, isolating the variable is just getting the variable by itself, and inverse operations are opposite operations. So if we see multiplication, the inverse is division. And if we see division, the inverse is multiplication. So what do you see happening to the variable in this equation? It's a over 3. And in case you're not sure, when you have a variable over a number, you're dividing that variable. And what's the inverse of division? Well, that's multiplication. So I'll multiply the right side by 3, and then do the same exact thing to the left. Again, just multiplying by 3. Remember that when you do the same exact thing to the right and left side of the equation, it's called balancing the equation. And when you balance the equation, it just means you're using inverse operations on both sides. Now I want to show you exactly what happens here, because a lot of students get tricked with this part. When you're multiplying by 3, that's the same exact thing as multiplying by 3 over 1. And when we do that, we get 3 times a, which is 3a, and 3 times 1, which is 3. And that will look like this. So now we've got 3a over 3, which really ends up just being division. So what happens to these 3's? Well, they cancel out. So now we can just do the math. 3 times 12 is 36. Then we'll bring down our equal sign and bring down our variable a. So our answer is 36 equals a. It doesn't matter that the variable's on the right. We could just as easily write it like this. It doesn't matter as long as one side has the variable and one side has the value. These two things mean the same exact thing. Either way, it's the solution. It's just the numeric value for the variable in the equation. So here's your pause and practice. Just pause and practice. Hit the pause button and try these questions. When you're done and you think you're right, hit the play button to see if you're correct. Ready, set, go. So let's take a look at our answers. Number 1. The solution is f equals 28. Number 2. The solution is y equals 12. Number 3. The solution is g equals 60. Number 4. The solution is h equals 6. Number 5. The solution is v equals 14. Number 6. The solution is a equals 20. Number 7. The solution is w equals 5. And number 8, the solution is n equals 80. So out of 8, how many questions did you get right? Let me know in the comments below. So what did we learn today? In order to solve an algebraic equation, you must isolate the variable. In order to isolate the variable, you must use inverse operations. The inverse operation of multiplication is division. The inverse operation of division is multiplication. When solving one-step equations with multiplication or division, how many steps do we use? There are 2 steps. Step 1 is to drop lines around the equal sign. This separates the left and right side of the equation. Step 2 is to cancel out any multiplication or division using inverse operations.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Questions? Comments? Leave them down below.
And thanks for using Mr. Ace Math. Don't just pass math, ace it.